Well, good morning. Christmas is just 2 days away. I hope you're ready for this special holiday. There's the decorations, the gifts, the gathering of families, and then there's the matter of how the holiday came about in the first place, as they say, the reason for the season. We'll be talking about that this morning, and we also have a news story for you about the adventures of the man from Trenary. It all starts right now.
From TV6, this is The Ryan Report. Here's your host, Don Ryan.
Well, good morning. We are a couple of days away from Christmas, and over the years on this show, we've looked at Christmas from several different perspectives. We've learned about Christmas traditions with some of the people you see on the air here on TV6 every day. We've done Santa Claus and 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, and we've taken the time to remind us all that there are people in our communities who won't necessarily have a joyful holiday without our help. Today we're going to talk about the person the holiday celebrates, for this is also a time to celebrate the birth of Jesus Christ. We're going to spend some time this morning talking about who he is and why his birth was so important to followers of the Christian faith. And I know that not all of you are members of that faith, but I hope that even those who are not will agree that his story is amazing and unique. Our guest this morning is the Reverend Chad Ott, pastor of Redeemer Lutheran Church in Marquette. Pastor Ott, welcome to the Ryan Report.
Thanks, Don, for having us here.
Nice to have you with us. We'll talk about Christmas in just a few minutes, but as is our tradition, let's find out about you first of all. And I know with a little bit of research, you are an actual Youper by birth.
I am. I was born on the eastern side of the UP in Newberry. Lived in Engadine for a couple years of my life. My dad's first call was there, and then when I was going into third grade, we relocated to Ishpeming. And so Ishpeming and Marquette County's been the bulk of my hometown experience, but born over on the east side, lived most of the life here on the west side.
Okay.
So.
And your dad was also a pastor in the Lutheran Church.
Yeah, as I mentioned, his first call was to a small rural town, Engadine. I'm sure some of you have probably driven by it on the way to the bridge. He was there for about eight years, I think, and then he came up here to Christ the King in Ishpeming and served there for 32 years. So I think he served as a parish pastor for about 40 years and retired about 4 or 5 years ago. And now I have the privilege, he and my mom are members at our church. So every once in a while he can help me out with a hospital call or something, and it's very helpful.
Does he ever give you a little critiques?
He tries not to, because he knows that no, he's pretty good at not doing that.
You did not originally plan to follow in his footsteps, did you?
You know, I don't know if, some people just want to do what their dad did, some don't. I mean, my story goes, I did not want to do what my dad was doing. The last thing on my mind was to be a pastor. I set off to college. I was going to Valparaiso University with the vision to be a graphic designer, to be an art major, and to start in that field. And God had different plans for me. He kind of made a change in my life where he kind of showed me that being a pastor is really what he was calling me to do.
How did that change come about? Is there?
Yeah, one summer I was working at a Camp Luther in Three Lakes, Wisconsin. It's an outdoor ministry camp for our Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, and it's a beautiful place. It's like 230 acres of just pristine swimming and canoeing and all these things. And I worked there for summer, and of course, as a camp counselor, one of the things you did is you taught Bible study, and you kind of got to know these kids and talked about faith matters and who Jesus is, and gosh, I was just taken by how enjoyable and how much I loved being a part of that faith relationship with kids at that time. And I thought to myself, why wouldn't I want to do this for the rest of my life full time? And it was with about 2 or 3 weeks left before I was supposed to go back to college that I called my parents, said, there's going to be a change in plans. I'm going to a different college. I'm switching gears. I'm going to become a pastor. So that was a formidable summer in my life. It was also a good summer. It was the summer I met my soon-to-be wife then. So it was a very good summer at Camp Luther.
And with your wife, you now have a family too, several children?
We do, yeah. Our oldest, Emily, is her first year in college down in Mequon, Wisconsin at Concordia. And then I have 2 in high school, Kyle and Julia. Actually, Julia's in junior high, but will be in high school next year.
And you're living in the right place, as it turns out, because I know you enjoy the outdoors.
I do. Anytime I can get outside is a good day. I love to fish for salmon in the summer. love to bow hunt and rifle hunt. Wasn't successful this year, but my son was, so that was good. But yeah, anytime I can get out and whether it's hunting or fishing or camping, those are fun times and relaxing times for me.
And about Redeemer Lutheran Church, it has pretty deep roots in Marquette, doesn't it?
Yeah, Redeemer's interesting. We are the merger of two older churches. What's interesting is there was a church by the name of Sion. It would be the Finnish-speaking Lutheran church, and Trinity was the German-speaking. Back in the late 1800s, they were separate churches, but in 1966, the two came together to merge to become what is known as Redeemer Lutheran, and so the Finlanders and the Germans created a unified church. And so we're unique in the sense that we're only a little over 50 years old, which is by church time is kind of a younger church. But when you look at the churches that you were a part of being around in Marquette in the 1800s, we kind of span the whole region of young and old.
And I know Redeemer places a lot of emphasis on youth and children's programs, doesn't it?
Yeah, one of the blessings at our church is our preschool childcare. We have anywhere between 90 to 100 kids in our preschool program. It's a great opportunity for us to connect with young families, and many people join our faith community through that. And then in the summertime, we have Vacation Bible School, which has just been a wonderful program that's built up over the years. We have about 400 kids that come in, and that can be a kind of a exciting, crazy time. It takes 175 volunteers to make that program really hum, and so there's a little logistics of having 500 or 600 people in there, but it's a wonderful week of kids singing and singing to Jesus and doing crafts and games and snacks, and that's every year in the summer.
Okay. We'll be back to talk about Christmas in just a couple of minutes. Back with more on the Ryan Report after we take this break. We're talking with Pastor Chad Ott from Redeemer Lutheran Church, talking about Christmas. This must be a busy time for you at Redeemer Church.
It is. Christmas is it's very busy. Tomorrow being Christmas Eve, we have 4 services. We have a 3 o'clock, a 5 o'clock, a 7, and a 9 p.m. service. Our 3 o'clock is our most contemporary service, and then our 9 o'clock is our most traditional with a processional and Holy Communion. But through those 4 services, we could have anywhere between 1,300 to 1,700 people coming through our building and worshiping Christ. And so suffice it to say, I sleep well on when I finally get to sleep on Christmas Eve night.
So you don't hear Santa Claus coming?
If he's coming, I'm out.
Let's talk about Christmas. It is the most widely celebrated holiday of all, although not all celebrate it for the same reason. Christmas as a holiday was intended to celebrate the birth of Jesus Christ. I think it's fair to say that no matter what a person's religious belief, theologians and historians agree that a man or a deity named Jesus Christ was on this earth over 2,000 years ago. Is that a fair statement?
That is a fair statement. I like how you said that, a man or a deity named Jesus Christ. You know, I think most historians will easily acknowledge that there was a man, Jesus of Nazareth, who lived and who was crucified by the Romans. A lot of people believe he was just any old human being on earth. What makes that different from Christians is we believe that he was also the Son of God, and is the Son of God, I would even say, because we believe he's alive now in heaven and coming back one day. So he is, we teach, 100% human. He's human in every way we are, except without sin, and he's 100% God. He's the very Son of God who God sent on Christmas to be our solution for the world's problem of sin.
And most of the story is told in the New Testament, but the Old Testament of the Bible also prophesies his coming, doesn't it?
Yeah, I was just looking through some of our Christmas services for this coming weekend, and there's lots of Old Testament prophecies that refer to the Messiah, to Jesus coming. Some are pretty explicit, some are kind of more veiled, or it takes a little bit more reading to catch up to. But for example, in Micah chapter 5 verses 2 through 5, it talks about how Bethlehem, though you are the smallest of the clans of Judah, from you will come one who will be the shepherd that will lead God's people. And of course we know, as we sing Little Town of Bethlehem, that was the city where Jesus was born. Isaiah prophesies about the virgin being with child, and a son being born to us, a child being given, and gives him these names as Mighty God, Everlasting Father. So there's some very clear passages that perhaps if you're in worship this weekend, you'll hear some of those. And then there's some other ones that are a little bit more hidden about God sending a prophet who will be greater than all the other prophets. That's even in Deuteronomy, prophet greater than Moses and Elijah and those.
And most of his life, as we read about it in the Bible, shows him relating more to the downtrodden, the common people of that era.
Yeah, even with the Christmas story, I love the idea that that Mary is chosen to be the very mother of Jesus, the mother of God, and she's kind of a humble peasant girl. I mean, even in her what we call the Magnificat, her song celebrating that she gets to give birth to Jesus, she says God has looked at the humble estate of his servant. And so, God could have chose anyone, but he didn't choose some queen from Jerusalem. He chose humble Mary. Or for example, when Jesus' birth is foretold, the first ones to see it are the shepherds. The shepherds were not the highest on the social economic ladder. In fact, a lot of times, my reading, if a tool was stolen from a shed, sometimes somebody would say it must have been one of those shepherds that took it. They were kind of a nomadic people and sometimes not looked upon all that. And so I think God does he shows us that this message is for all people, that especially even the downtrodden.
And of course, the circumstances of his birth in a manger. You can't get much simpler than that.
No, you can't. I mean, once again, when we think of royalty being born, we think of the finest and the highest arrangements. And as we know very well from the story, there was no room for him at the inn. So he was born in a manger. And there amongst the animals came the king of creation. So it is very humbling. And it kind of sets the tone for who Jesus really is and how his ministry would shape, that he would be this one sent from God, who is God, to be humble and to give his life humbly on the cross for all of us.
And if there are those who'd like to know more about this story who haven't read the story, what would be the best places to go in the Bible to find them?
Yeah, so the best place to start would be in Luke chapter 2. That's your classic Christmas story. That's if you watch the Charlie Brown special, that's the part Linus is reading there. Matthew chapter 1 also speaks of how Jesus would be named and what his name means. And so Luke 2 and Matthew 1 are great places. Mark's gospel doesn't have the Christmas story. He starts with his baptism and focuses on his ministry. John talks about, the Gospel of John talks about the Word becoming flesh, but he talks in more of a theological, he doesn't go into the details of the actual. So basically Luke 2 and Matthew 1 is where you'd want to go.
Okay, we'll have some more questions for you in just a couple of minutes. Back with more on today's show after we take this break. Once again, our guest this morning is Pastor Chad Ott from Redeemer Lutheran Church in Marquette. One of the amazing things to me, and probably it's because of, what I do, but, if Jesus were to come to earth today, immediately there would be cameras and there would be newspapers and there would be internet coverage and everything, and it would spread around the globe instantly. But that isn't the way it was in his age, is it?
No, it was quite different. In fact, when we do confirmation classes with our junior high kids, we sometimes show them this kind of parody. It's called A Digital Christmas, and it shows exactly what you said, Don. What would it be like if he came today? The wise men Googling the route to get there, and social media being the way to announce his birth. And you're right. I mean, we would talk about how this is the most viral thing we've seen on the internet, and yet there was no mass media as we know it. What's interesting is in the Epistle Galatians, Paul writes that at just the right time God sent his Son. And some have speculated that comment, at just the right time, what does that mean? And some historians have noted three things that were kind of interesting about the time when he was born. One, that it was after a time of where the world had been Hellenized, the Hellenization of Alexander the Great, that they all had a common language of speaking Greek. And so that was one of the things that made that a good time, that you spoke your regular language, but you also knew Greek. They talked about, secondly, there being great roads during that time, which we probably wouldn't consider them so great, but they were very safe for travel. Paul went on 4 missionary journeys and brought the gospel to people. And then finally, what was called the Pax Romana, the peace of Rome. Because Rome was in charge of the world, there wasn't as much warfare as there had been. So some have suggested that was a great time for this message to really take birth. I think as Christians, one of the other things that we realize is that the Holy Spirit, the third person of the Trinity, governs his church and saw to it that the gospel was spread and that the message of Jesus was shared with the world.
And again, it's amazing that that message endures for over 2,000 years, and it still, is enduring today.
Yeah,
for many people.
Yeah, it is. It is. The fact that Jesus invested his life in 12 disciples, and the message continued to go forth, and he built his church through that profession of faith.
Is that message still relevant today?
It's very relevant today. I think sometimes people feel as though it's not relevant in their lives. Sometimes I think people feel that this idea of sin is kind of quaint or moralistic, and we're living in such a different time. I would say that even if you don't use the word sin, even if I give you that, we all know what it's like to have things in our lives that we know what it's like to have guilt. We know what it's like to have regrets. We know what it's like to make mistakes in our relationships. We know what it's like to live in a broken world. We see that in all sorts of things in our experience. Taking the word sin even away, Jesus comes into this broken world to fix it. And it's not fixed here, but one day in heaven we will be given a perfect rest with him. And so I think for people who are lonely, hurt, broken, regretful, that this message of a Savior who forgives and who starts all things new for them is very relevant.
And what message would you have for those in our audience who perhaps haven't been connected to a church, or, as we approach this holiday? We have less than a minute left. But
yeah, as you said at the beginning, everybody celebrates Christmas in different ways, and maybe this Christmas would be a great time for you to find a church. Maybe there's a church you've been a part of and you haven't been there in a while, and want to go there and hear the message of Christ as part of that celebration with your family. There's a lot of great churches here in the UP that proclaim that message. Obviously, if you're in Marquette, you can come to Redeemer, but there's a lot of other churches too that are sharing that message, and we'll all be singing the songs and sharing the message of a God who sent his son because he loved us to die for our sins and to rise again on the third day, and that is his birthday, and we're going to celebrate it with the fullness of the Spirit he gives us.
Okay. Thanks very much for coming in this morning and sharing that story with us.
Well, thanks, Don, for having me.
I'll be back with another story about a man from Trenary after we take this break. Earlier this year, we brought you a story about a man from Trenary who became trapped in the Marquette roundabouts until he was rescued by his wife. We received so many great comments about that story that we have a new one for you as that man from Trenary prepares for Christmas. You see, a man from Trenary woke up one fine day and said to himself, "What should I do today? This is Christmas Eve. The big day is almost here, and I still have no present for the one I hold dear. I will head for Marquette, where they have gifts galore, where the shelves are all loaded in each and every store." But before he headed out, he asked his wife what he should do. If she wanted a special gift, could she give him a clue? And that's just what she did. A subtle hint is what she gave. Then he jumped in his car and drove off with a wave. The roundabouts in town were a problem no more. He knew he could find his way to a big superstore. He approached that first roundabout, and the old fears came rushing back. But he knew he could do it, so he went on the attack. He went round those curves like an old racing pro, like a driver from NASCAR. He put on a show. With his fears now behind him, he set out on his quest. He would find a gift that would be the very best. But the man from Trenary was not feeling glad. Matter of fact, he was feeling a little sad. He didn't like Christmas shopping. That was his fear. It wasn't the Christmas music in the stores he would hear. It wasn't the money, the crowds, or the noise, but finding a gift that would bring this season's joys. He went to Walmart and Target and the new Meijer store, to Kohl's, Lowe's, and Menards, and still even more. but no one had the gift he wanted to find. Then suddenly his attention was attracted by a sign. It was a specialty store, and they had what he sought. And with time running out, that present was bought. And it was soon Christmas morning, and the moment was here. It was time to present his gift with anticipation and cheer. And as she opened her gift, her excitement just grew. She couldn't wait to get the wrappings off so the gift would be in view. But when she opened the box and was looking inside, she was so amazed her eyes opened wide. "What's this?" she said. I'm really afraid. The gift you bought me is a hearing aid?" "Isn't that what you wanted?" he said with a smile. "Figuring out your clue really took me a while. You said the gift you wanted for Christmas this year would help you have conversations with all the friends you hold dear. I thought about it carefully and knew I had it made if I could just go out and buy you the best hearing aid." "You're crazy," she said. "I have no trouble hearing at all. What I wanted was a new iPhone, so my friends I could call. We've never had a cell phone to call and to text. That's what I wanted under my Christmas tree next." "I'm sorry," he said. "I messed up again this year. I didn't get the right gift for the one I hold dear." "Oh, don't worry," she said, as she saw his joy sinking. "It's the thought that counts. But what were you thinking? Tomorrow we'll head back to town once more and get the gift I really want from the telephone store." And with that, they sat back and admired their tree. The man from Trinary was now happy as can be. I'll be back in a minute. That's our show for today. If you want to see it again or recommend it to someone else, it will be available at uppermichigansource.com starting tomorrow. Thanks to Pastor Chad Ott for joining us this morning to talk about Christmas and what it means to Christians. Let me take this opportunity to wish all of you a Merry Christmas and Happy Holiday Season. We'll be back next week to take a look back at 2018. Hope you'll join us then.